by the year 2060, the number who are north of what we call being a senior citizen now is going to swell to nearly 100 million Americans. So who takes care of 100 million folks? Manchester Place Group Homes Medical Director Dr. Kelley Newcomer is my guest, and we're going to talk about this right now. Dr. Newcomer, good morning.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here. Well, some people are calling this the silver tsunami, or, the big gray wave, the graying of America. Europe gets there sooner than us. Some immigration, though, changing the pattern a little bit for them. But in terms of native-born population, they're getting old at a very quick rate, and we are starting to catch up. What's the upshot of all this in your mind?
Well, the good news is we're living longer and better than we ever have. The problem is that seniors are surviving more devastating illnesses and injuries than ever before. The problem is they're not surviving those with the ability to be independent still. So we have this group of elderly, sick patients that need somewhere to live because they are requiring a lot of care. And the cost of that care is going up all the time, and there is a shortage of care providers for both RNs, LVNs, nurses, doctors, and doctors who specialize in geriatrics. So the situation is tough right now, but all the indicators are that it will continue to get worse.
I had to go through some of that with my own mom, and the idea when you look at look at all the options. There's this, there may be a different living situation. Oh, that'll be a cold day in Hellbuster. There's the desire by seniors to live independently, but you're right. We had years on, and this isn't something that a prior generation really had to think much about because cutting by the numbers at a certain point, and that includes the money, how long the money would last, because people had an expiration date that was pretty easy to figure out, and that's changed dramatically.
Exactly. And one of the problems that people don't realize, the adult children of my patients are always so surprised to learn that Medicare does not pay for long-term care at all. They do not pay for it. And so they don't understand how their parents are going to pay for it. And so the amount of money that you have to save right now as a person in your 30s, 40s, and 50s is really high, because now in America, the average person lives 19 years after the age of 65. That's a long time to survive on retirement income, especially if you need a lot of outside help.
Yeah, and then, when Social Security came into being, when you hit 65, the clock was on. And it wasn't, and especially for those in the early era that didn't pay as much, the people later paid in, they weren't expected to live very long, and that was part of, I hate to say that was part of their end of the bargain, but that was part of their end of the bargain. And of course, that bargain has been changed. Now, can people do things aside from saving to insure themselves against a future catastrophic situation when they're over the age of 65 and outside of that Medicare zone? Are there ways to do that don't involve a heavy? Because let's say, what if you're already 60 years old? Now you're already down that road. So what can you do?
Well, I think one very important thing to do is prevention of care that you don't want or doesn't benefit you, because we do not have these conversations with our family members and our loved ones about what is their line in the sand, what illness do they not want to survive. Because sadly enough, a lot of people get care and aggressive treatment when they really shouldn't. And a huge percentage, something like 25% of our Medicare expenditures happen in the last year of life. And many of us in the medical profession would argue that that's very futile care that should never have been administered to begin with. And so it's very important that you have those conversations with your children to give them permission to say, when I cannot do X, Y, and Z, when I do not have a quality of life that I would define as this, I do not want to survive the devastating illness that comes along. Because no matter how healthy we are, for all of us, a day will come when we become unhealthy. That's inevitable. So our children need to understand what is our quality of life determination when we say, you know what, let me go at this point. Don't keep rescuing me. So I think those are very important conversations to have, and the Department of Aging and Disability Services website has a lot of good guidance for these. And all of the paperwork that you need, like medical power of attorney, advanced care directives, those sorts of things are all available for free on their website.
How many times have you been around yourself as a doctor and been around a family who was gathered either at a bedside and they're wondering, well, they're wondering out loud, what do you think Dad would want? And Dad's got tubes down him, and there's a thing going beep, beep, and Dad can't answer for himself. I bet it's been a lot.
Oh, it has been way too much. And I think part of that is because they don't have those conversations. But also, we equate loving people by giving them care. And at a certain point, we have to come to realize that really loving our parents means not giving them care and respecting their wishes.
And on the medical side, I mean, you have to default to, in not knowing what those wishes are, you default towards, saving a life and giving the care because that's in an error situation, a default, you have to do that, don't you?
We do, unfortunately. But I think a lot of that is just taking the time to have those conversations with the adult children and giving them permission to say, you know what, you don't have to do this thing that this other doctor is recommending. We don't have to be aggressive at this point. It's okay to say no because the chances of your mom and dad surviving this with any quality of life are very poor. And I always remind them that in 20 years of doing this, I have never once had a senior say, oh, no, keep me going after that giant stroke. Put a feeding tube down me. Put me in a nursing home, but by golly, keep me going. What they say overall is, I'm done when I get to that point. I do not want to survive that. And so I think making people aware of that, it's just a conversation we don't like to have in America. We all want to talk about wellness, which is very important, but we don't want to talk about what happens when we're no longer well.
Dr. Kelley Newcomer, our guest here, she's the medical director at Manchester Place Group Homes. You're talking about the upcoming Silver Tsunami is what it's being dubbed. And while I gave the figure of the year 2060, that's when we're going to hit about 100 million Americans over the age of 65. The Silver Tsunami really is underway right now and in a big way out there. Dr. Newcomer, appreciate you being on very much.
Thank you for having me. Have a good day.
All right, you too. So there it is.